Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to our topic on teacher accountability. And this is part of the Curriculum and Methods in Secondary Education course at Misericordia University. In a past session of this class, we talked about school accountability. Now, let's focus more directly on teacher accountability and teacher evaluation. When we set out to measure the effectiveness of a teacher, we really look at three different areas: planning, implementation, and assessment. In planning, we're talking about how the teacher defines goals and objectives, identifies content and instructional strategies, and how to deliver the lesson, what kinds of instructional media, what kind of climate are we going to set up in the classroom, and how are we going to plan our assessment. In implementing, we're looking at presenting. This is the actual in the classroom work that the teacher does, the explaining. We do questioning, listening, monitoring, demonstration. We give feedback. And then at the end, we assess. So when we assess, we're trying to determine the level of student learning through tests and through a variety of other kinds of assessment measures as well. So the question here is, how is effective teaching measured today in our schools? What standards inform the teacher evaluation? And how are teachers being evaluated today? Let's look at several different methods and several different standards that inform this process. The first set of standards that we'll take a look at is called the InTASC Standards for Teacher Preparation. The word InTASC refers to the Interstate Teacher Assessment and Support Consortium. So this is a group of state educational agencies and national educational organizations who have come together for the purpose of reforming the preparation, the licensing, and the ongoing development of teachers. This group has created a set of standards that, in their eyes, if a teacher is competent in each of these areas, that we can say that that teacher is effective in his or her job. So let's start by looking at the overall scheme of these standards, the overall organization, and then let's quickly examine each of these areas. So the standards are broken down into the learner and learning. And there are three standards in that category. Content knowledge, instructional practice, and then finally, the last two standards are in the area of professional responsibility. As we briefly survey these standards, notice how comprehensive they are, how they involve all the different areas that a teacher is involved in. And also, you will find that these standards have helped to inform this course and how we help to prepare our secondary ed teachers to become effective teachers. The first standard dealing with learners is learner development. And under this standard, we're talking about that the teacher understands learners. They understand their growth and development. They recognize how they learn and how they develop in a whole bunch of different ways, which includes cognitively, linguistically, socially, emotionally, physically, and then the teacher can design and implement developmentally appropriate and also challenging learning experiences for these learners given this understanding. The teacher should also appreciate learning differences among different students, students in different communities, students of different diverse cultures. And the teacher should be able to create an appropriate environment to support individual and also group learning that encourages positive social interaction, active engagement in the learning process, and also motivation. In terms of content that the teacher will teach, there are two standards. The first is understanding the content knowledge. In other words, the concepts, the tools that are used of inquiry, different structures within that discipline. And in addition to understanding the content, the teacher has to be able to connect the understanding with application so that the students can do something with this content. Further, the teacher should be able to engage the learners in terms of this content in critical thinking, in creativity, and in collaborative problem solving related to actual issues in the world today. In other words, the content should, to the students, they should be aware the content really does apply to them and it's very relevant in their lives. The next three standards deal with the actual process of teaching in the classroom. The first one is assessment. The teacher has to understand multiple methods of assessment and be able to use these methods in order to monitor learner progress and to make decisions that will guide what we do in the classroom to help those learners succeed. Teachers then have to be able to effectively plan for instruction to take place and to take place effectively. And also, the teacher then has to be able to use instructional strategies effectively in the classroom. So to be able to do that, the teacher must first have awareness of and understand how to use a variety of instructional strategies that can both encourage learners to develop a deeper understanding of the content and their connections to other areas of content, including cross-disciplinary connections, and also to be able to build skills to apply this knowledge in meaningful ways. In other words, they have to learn what to do with it and make application of the knowledge that they have gained. The final two InTASC standards deal with professionalism. The first standard in this area deals with professional learning and ethical practice. The teacher is a lifelong learner and continually evaluates his or her practice, and especially focuses on the choices and the actions that the teacher takes and the impact that that has on learners, their families, other professionals in the school, and throughout the community. In other words, teachers are always learning, and we're very ethical in what we do, and we monitor to ensure that we continue in that direction. And the second standard in professionalism, and also the very last standard in the whole model by InTASC, is leadership and collaboration. Teachers are change agents. We're leaders. So an effective teacher seeks out appropriate leadership roles and looks for opportunities where he or she can take responsibility for student learning. And we collaborate with other people, both in the school and outside of the school, within the community, to ensure the growth of all the learners and to advance our profession. Now let's take a look at the second model that informs teacher accountability and helps us to measure teacher effectiveness in Pennsylvania. It's called the Danielson model. Charlotte Danielson created this seminal work, this foundational book that's called The Handbook of Enhancing Professional Practice. And in this book, she outlines a framework for teaching. Danielson's framework for teaching is a research-based set of components of instruction. In other words, things that teachers do in their job. It's aligned to the InTASC standards that we just took a look at in this video. And it's also grounded in a constructivist view of learning and teaching. In the framework, Danielson breaks down all of the different activities that teachers do and divides them into 22 components. From there, she divides it further into 76 smaller elements, and they're all clustered into 4 domains of responsibility for the teacher. The 4 domains are planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. And if you recall back to the InTASC standards, those categories are very similar to InTASC. And again, the 2 models are related in that way. So broadly speaking, the framework identifies 4 general categories or general areas of responsibility for the teacher. When we look at domain 1, similar to in the InTASC standards, planning and preparation, it involves your content knowledge and your knowledge of how to teach it, the pedagogy. You have to have knowledge of students and understand their characteristics and how they learn and how they grow and so on. Setting instructional outcomes, demonstrating knowledge of various resources that you can use. You have to be able to design both instruction and assessments. In the domain of classroom environment, this involves the overall environment of that classroom, which includes the respect and rapport, the culture of learning that you create and foster. This involves classroom management, such as classroom procedures and student behavior. It also involves organizing the classroom, the physical space of the classroom. The third domain, instruction, of course, that's all the things that a teacher does in the classroom itself, how you communicate, how you use questioning techniques, discussion techniques, how you engage students in learning, how you use assessment and show that you are flexible and responsive to students' needs in the classroom. And the fourth domain is your professional responsibilities. So talking about the fact that teachers reflect on their teaching, they're record keepers, they communicate with families, they're participants in a professional community. They grow and develop professionally. We're always learners, and we're always showing professionalism. Now, each of these items in each of these domains will be further broken down into many subparts to help explain it better and to go into much more detail. In Pennsylvania, and also in many other states, teacher performance in the classroom is evaluated using the Danielson rubric. Now you can look at the teacher effectiveness page on the PDE SAS webpage, and they also feature the Danielson's Framework for Teaching Evaluation instrument. Let's take a look at those resources. Here we are on the teacher effectiveness page of the Pennsylvania SAS system. So as we look through the page, here you'll find more explanatory material about Charlotte Danielson's model and how it came about. Here's a link to student learning objectives. And then here are examples and also questions for teachers in particular content areas. Here you'll also find a link to the complete rubric, and we're going to click into that now. So in this rubric, this is the evaluation instrument, and it's broken into the 4 domains. So we'll start by just looking at the first one. We'll look at planning and preparation. And here you can see the Venn diagram indicating that all these areas are overlapping, and all 4 areas constitute what a teacher does. So when I start in this first domain, here's 1A, which is the knowledge of content and pedagogy. So you'll find an explanation. We'll find some information about relationships between different elements. And then we'll find the rubric. on which teachers will be evaluated based on 4 different categories, from unsatisfactory to distinguished, with most teachers falling somewhere between the basic and the proficient levels. And then we find unsatisfactory in this area means this, and basic. And here's some critical attributes, so it helps and guides observers in the classroom. And then same with proficient and distinguished. So we have a good explanation, more thorough, and again some indicators, some items to look at as well. And then we move in a similar fashion on to those other areas in that domain. And then we can move on also to the other of the 4 domains. Now let's take a look at the Act 82 Educator Effectiveness page at PDE, and let's consider the Educator Effectiveness tool. We'll look at the spreadsheet as is based on Danielson's model. So here we are on PDE's page about educator effectiveness and Act 82. And Act 82 involves building level and also teacher and principal evaluations. On the bottom of the page, we can access spreadsheets so we can see the actual tools that are used. So let's click into the spreadsheet used for teachers. So here we're in the spreadsheet. We have the instructions. There's information that we fill out on the teacher. You'll notice there's a tab for observation and practice, and you'll notice those 4 domains up here. And a teacher will get a rating from 0, which is failing, to needs improvement, proficient. So again, most teachers hopefully are right in this area, 1 and 2, or distinguished, which is a 3, and that will be listed right over in this column. You notice that there's also information about the building, and if there are multiple buildings, and then again some teacher-specific information. So you notice with the teacher-specific information, we're looking at information in these areas. Student performance on assessments. So is a teacher partially judged by how students are being held accountable on and how they're performing on the keystones, the PSSA, and other tests? And the answer is yes. So there is a certain percentage of those data that play into how teachers are performing. And then also value-added assessment system data, also information about how students are making progress and making goals on IEPs. And also a school district has the ability to develop local rubrics and look at other assessment methods as well. And that's where we'll see in this next tab the electives and multiple electives. So a district can have extra and some of its own, so we have more flexibility in determining how we are all going to be evaluated. In this rating tool, if I click back into the teacher-specific measures, you'll notice that in the area of the locally developed school district rubrics, it states that this rating uses the SLO process. So let's take a moment and take a look at the SLO process in schools in Pennsylvania. As you just observed, as we took a look at the spreadsheet, which contains the teacher effectiveness tool, which is part of the teacher effectiveness system called for in Act 82, that it calls for multiple measures of evidence to evaluate teachers. And it's a combination of observation and also other types of evidence that are based on the Danielson Framework. So you saw that 50% is based on observation, some is based on building level data, and then also teacher specific and also elective data. So the elective data, districts have elected to make up this portion with the SLO. The SLO is very important because this part of the evaluation is tied to employment, and it may even be tied to pay. So let's take a look at it. Let's start by defining what SLO means. SLO refers to Student Learning Objectives. PDE defines it this way. It's a process to document a measure of educator effectiveness based on student achievement of content standards. The nice thing is that SLO allows teachers to take an active role in determining their own evaluation process rather just being observed and assessed from outside parties. The teacher actually has a say in what measures will be used to determine his or her effectiveness. The SLO focuses on student growth, and it has a focus on the entire group of students. And we'll see that in a moment. Teachers usually perform between 1 to 2 SLOs per year. And in this process, teachers are identified by a number, and Pennsylvania is not publishing individual teacher results. So this is kept private at this time. In doing an SLO, teachers determine and identify what performance indicator is going to be used and what are the targets. So the targets are based on the nature of the class, so the group of individuals you're working with, and also based on the type of assignment that you're giving and at what point in a unit you're giving that assignment. Teachers are ultimately assessed on how their students hit those targets. Since teachers individually are setting the targets in which their class is going to hit, considering all the students in your class, as a new teacher, be careful not to overestimate your prediction. So for example, if you're going to estimate that, I think everyone's going to improve a lot and 100% of the students will get an A in this exam, in this indicator. That's probably not going to be realistic because you're probably never going to have 100% of the students ever hitting a perfect grade in a particular assignment or an assessment. So we want to be realistic with it. And also, this helps a teacher, it provides us a reality check about like what can we really expect. And then further, even more importantly maybe, it leads teachers to consider how are you going to handle the students who are not able to meet that selected target. And that's the purpose of the SLO. It's meant to help teachers improve learning effectiveness. So let's finish this video by taking an overview of the student learning objective, the SLO template. So this is what the teacher will fill out as part of the evaluation process. So it'll start off with the name of the teacher and some information about the class. And then you'll notice in terms of the goal, what is the goal statement? What are the standards? And what's the rationale for this? Then we go on to identify different performance measures. So there's an opportunity to have several different performance measures included in to evaluate this SLO. So what kinds of evaluation measures are you going to use? Are you going to be testing or giving an assignment? Is there some type of some demonstration that the student will do, maybe give a presentation? So you get to identify those pieces, and then the teacher gets to determine the rating of this. So what are the targets? So the performance indicators and the targets. And down here you can see the elective rating. So the teacher gets to fill in how many students are expected to fail this, how many will need improvement, how many will score proficient, and how are you going to determine what that proficiency level is, and distinguished. So when we look at this, maybe the distinguished category may be something like 90% and to 100, and maybe in the target, you might suggest that only a certain number of students are going to be hitting this category. So as you can see, the teacher has a lot to say and a lot of input here as to how we are going to be evaluated according to this process. In review, during this video, we started by reviewing two types of standards for teacher preparation that impact teacher effectiveness evaluation. We looked at the InTASC standards, and then we looked at the Danielson Framework for teaching and how Pennsylvania and PDE has used this framework and the InTASC standards to form the basis of the teacher evaluation system. Then we looked at the effective educator evaluation tool based on Danielson, and finally we concluded by looking at the student learning objectives, which is one element in the latest teacher evaluation system that's used with all Pennsylvania teachers. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in class.